Hello, everyone, and welcome to the monthly NASW Pennsylvania Chapter webinar. My name is Lorelei Aubrey, and I'm the Executive Secretary here at the NASW-PA State Office. This free webinar series is done as a member benefit and is available to members only. Webinars are done each month on the last Wednesday of the month at 12 o'clock p.m. and count for 1 CE credit. During the webinar, if you have questions, please type them into the questions section of the menu on the side. To obtain your CE credit, you must attend a minimum of 50 minutes of this webinar. After the webinar, if you attended that minimum 50 minutes, you will receive an email with a link to complete the evaluation. The link will also be posted to the chat section near the close of the webinar. The certificate will be sent to you via email in a few days. Note that the certificates are not automatically generated, but will be sent by one of our staff members. Please allow at least a couple of days before you contact us to say that you haven't yet received your certificate. Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Santo D. Marabella, MBA, DSW, also known as the Practical Prof. Dr. Marabella is an author, playwright, filmmaker, speaker, and educator who creates, produces, and distributes edutainment, that makes a difference. He is the author of 2 books, The Lessons of Caring, Inspiration and Support for the Caregiver, 2018, and The Practical Prof, Simple Lessons for Anyone Who Works, 2014. And his newspaper column, Office Hours with the Practical Prof, has appeared in the Reading Eagle's Business Weekly since 2012. He has been a member of NASW since 1985. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lorelei, and welcome. It's really a pleasure to be with everyone. We were talking before we just went online, and it's like, so this will be interesting. It's almost like class where nobody talks, but they're there and they have to be there. And we'll get everything done in the 50 minutes because in case if you have to leave before then. But really, I think technology is an amazing thing these days that we can connect with each other. And I chose to be on camera with my silly ears because I like to bring faces to conversations. So I'm looking forward to walking through this with you. And we will have a few times for breaks for questions, which I'm happy to answer. Lorelei, as our producer today, is going to share some of these questions. And really, at any point, if there's questions, I think there's a hand-raising thing or there's a question chatty thing there. Feel free to. A little bit about, let me get rid of this so you don't have to look at that. Okay. So a little bit about me, as I appreciate the kind introduction. It's funny because I'm one of those folks who never saw himself as a social worker in a more traditional sense of practice, but I've always been a social worker at heart. Whether in my teaching or my consulting or my speaking or my writing, it's amazing how much a part of who I am comes from the values of social work and the values that I learned at SP2's Penn Social Policy and Practice. Pardon me. So it's really part of who I am, and I'm really grateful that I had that experience and that it still drives kind of the way I bring myself into professional situations. I just finished a column, and it was on character, and I borrowed from Maya Angelou's Just Do Right. And it's just amazing to me how many folks in business reacted to this. It's almost as if we want to talk about these things, and where else do we get to talk about these things? So I'm really blessed and excited to talk with you, professional social workers, in so many different levels of practice, because I have so much respect for you, and I also feel a kind of kindred connection to you, even though the focus of my work is not ostensibly social work, but it runs through my blood, as they say. So our agenda looks ambitious, but uh, it'll be fun. And we'll go through a lot of these uh, rather quickly. We already did the first one, a little bit about my background. I want to share some headlines of some of the things I've learned about caregiving. The question about 2 clients. Then some of the lessons that I've learned as a caregiver. You'll hear from some caregivers that I've spoken with, which I think it's always nice to hear from other folks, and some of the lessons that I glean from what they have shared. And then I wanted to get you thinking about some considerations for social workers. Not that we can do a lot of that in this session, in a 1-hour session, but this session is kind of a preview for the conference workshop that I'll be doing in September. We'll talk a little bit about that towards the end, and then wrap up. But as I said, there'll be times for questions. I don't know if you can see this on my cursor. So after this section, we'll have time for questions. And then after these 2 points, we'll have time for more questions. And then, of course, at the end. So I'm looking forward to that. And again, just let Laura and I know if you have any questions in the meantime. Let's take a look at some of the statistics. I don't need to read these to you, but I will kind of highlight. I was amazed that many people providing free care to loved ones in the U.S. 43.5 million. I was not amazed that most caregivers, family caregivers, are female, are women. I think there's some reasons why, obvious reasons why that might be the case. But again, as you'll notice, as you'll find out in my situation as an only child, I needed to step up. So that made for a difference. But it concerns me, and part of the reason of this webinar and the conference in the fall, part of the reason, my motivation is I really so want caregivers to be given more support. I'm very fortunate that I have a village. They say it takes a village to raise your kids. I think it takes a village to raise your parents too. And I'm very blessed to have that. And even though I have no siblings, but I believe there are a lot of people who don't. And I believe there are a lot of moms and wives who are consumed with so many other things that don't have the support they need. So my hope, partly in presenting to you today and in the fall, is to raise that awareness, which, I'm not assuming that you don't know this. I certainly respectfully share this with you. Oh, here's a surprise. Not. Really? Caregivers neglect their own health. Surprised? I'm sure you're not. I am part of that statistic, or at least that comment. Made some changes I'll talk a little bit about, but yeah, it's easy to get there. Look at this one. This was a very concerning stat. But again, when I look at folks that I know and folks who've taken care of their loved ones or their spouse or their significant other, it doesn't surprise me that they would pass first. It's very sad. It's very sad. So another reason why I think we really have to step up what we can to help, to support caregivers. Interesting. And I guess years ago it was called the sandwich generation, and that those folks, those baby boomers, taking care of kids and taking care of parents. And that seemed kind of a light, excuse me. Oh, is that's cute saying? Not so cute. The reality of that is the caring is never finished for some people. I have a few high school classmates that through this project have reconnected with on social media, and one shared with me I was in her class 25 years caring for her father and then her mother. And she was a peaceful person who had no regrets, which is great. And we'll talk about that as well. But I've heard that very often. My kids were out when they were 20, when they were in college, but I'm still now taking care of my parents. So think about this. You probably have. If you haven't, do you do you have two clients? Those of you in micro practice, but also we'll talk in mezzo and macro practices that, and I guess I see this mostly with um, my folks. I'll give you a little background about them. Dad's 93, mom's 89 in 2 weeks, both living in their home where they've lived for 65 years, married 68 years. Italian, that should tell you some things. They're not leaving the home. And so it's been my goal to advance their goal, which is to stay in their home. And thankfully, now we have caregivers to help them. But with so many hospitalizations, I would say in the last 5 years, between the two of them, there have been 23 hospitalizations of 2 or more days. I've noticed, and I'm hoping it's isolated, but at times in some of the places where they have been, that the social workers have not perhaps recognized that I also, as their client, and very much involved client, very much a source of, if you look at it this way, you're seeing a picture when you go into an emergency room or where you go into bring somebody to a transitional place for living. You've seen the movie as the caregiver, as the family person. They're seeing the photo or the snapshot or the selfie for today. And I have many times had to say to social workers, to other care providers, doctors, nurses, let me show you the movie. Please, I need you to see the movie. Let me be your partner in this because I know my parents. I know what's going on. I do my research. I'm not a medical doctor, but I do what I need to do. So I'm hoping if you're not already awoke to this, that you become more aware of the importance of caregivers as your client as well. So the recent book that I wrote, it started out last year as an ebook because I had all these video interviews, which you'll see a segment of in a few minutes. But I don't know if you can see this on the video. But what I did is, thanks to a really smart friend, is I put it into a paperback because what I realized is that market for folks who are personal caregivers is 40s to 60s and above. They're not all out there with their ebooks yet. But I was wondering, how can I possibly connect the videos? And so what we did is we connected it through these QR codes, and I can't take the credit for that. A really smart friend, she said, well, have you tried QR codes? I'm like, no. So it now has been able to be brought to a bigger market of caregivers. So here's the thing about this. What I intended is this practical approach that is support and resources for caregivers, for people who are in similar situations to me. And of course, look, it is not exhaustive by any means. It is not complete. It is not definitive. How many disclaimers should I say? You get the point. It is my experience, and it helped me become better as a caregiver in a few ways I'll describe. But it is by no means the be all end all. I just believe in, when we have some insight, I think we have some responsibility to share that, and if we can impact and make a difference in others' lives, why not? So I covered a number of lessons, and so the first one I covered is the losses are many. Let me think about that. What do I mean? And I figured to start with this, although people can read and take the lessons as however they resonate with them. For me, I had to start with the losses are many. And I wrote this: we may never imagine how many and how endless the losses, neither may our loved ones. And we may be unprepared for the impact they have on us. Grieving the losses is a healthy beginning. So I'm blessed. I'm old, and I have parents, both my parents. I am very blessed, very grateful. But I don't have my parents. In the last 4 or 5 years, their participation in my life is diminishing. It erodes. I'm somebody who does, as you saw at the beginning, a lot of art, a lot of working in the arts, theater, film, TV. Also as a way of teaching, as a way of really kind of reinforcing social work values. And what I've noticed is my parents haven't been able to come to most of the things lately. And they were at everything I did. Everything. um, didn't play Little League, thankfully, but they were at everything I did: science fair, theater, concert, whatever. So that's just one concrete way that I've kind of started to begin to grieve that loss. And the problem is, I could have grieved, and I have grieved it in this way. With the second lesson, instead of sadness, and maybe it's generational, maybe it has something to do with how men and women are conditioned, I don't know, but I would go to anger. These losses make me mad that they're not around, that they can't come. And then, of course, I'm like, how selfish can you be? They can't come because they can't come. It physically can't come, or they're, you know, we don't know. So anger has been for me the first go-to, and so I have to constantly work at reframing this to sadness, because that's really what it is about. I'm just sad. I just grieve that they're not here in the ways that they were. And then I got to get over that, because they are here. And if I spend so much time in the sadness, I lose them more, because I don't get them for them being here now. Tough one for me to learn, I must say. The next lesson I learned is the regrets are avoidable. So this isn't an easy job, and really, it's not about me as much as it will sound like that maybe today, because I'm giving you my perspective. I am constantly trying to remember that this is not easy for them, that they have a lot of losses, they have a lot of sadness, they have a lot of frustration, and it's about them. And I do go back to that consistently, but not always. Come my humanity. But here's one thing that's definitely for us as caregivers. I will have no regrets when they are no longer here. I will have no regrets. That's it. I'm doing everything I can possibly do now. Um, to me, regret is this ever-present, gnawing, underlying, or not so latent feeling that I should have. And understanding and accepting our authentic caring or caregiving. Why am I doing this? Why am I taking on this role? Can help me avoid this. Am I taking it on to look good? Okay, that's human. That's possible. That might have a short fuse, and I am partly that's why I do it. I want to look good. I want to be a good son, but that's not it. That's not the total thing. I'm taking it on because it's the right thing to do for my parents, and not because they were so great to me, and they were. It's just what Maya Angelou says. It's just doing right. And I don't have a big ego about that, and think, it's like, let's pat myself on the back all the time. But I do constantly strive for that, and then I forget, and then I get back on target. Because I don't want those regrets when they're not here. I don't want to say I should have, would have, could have. The next one that I learned is the role is respect. In caregiving, the role is respect. Well, respect is this, honoring them and what they want doesn't always connect with what I want for them. For example, DNR, do not resuscitate, living wills, all those things, right? They don't want to be extended on life support. I get that. They are willing to be full code, but I've said this to my friends. That's very different from me. I want life support. Somebody pulls a plug, I will haunt you. I will come back. I will, I will be there to find you. But that's me, and whatever issues I have with that, that's not them. I need to respect what they need. And what they need is to know that after reasonable measures are done and there's no legitimate scientific or spiritual hope, then I need to respect that, to let them go. I have no idea how and when or if that's even going to be an issue, but I know what I have to do. But to do this, I have to first know what their wishes are, and then I have to keep them distinct from mine. And let me just say that in my family dynamic of Italian parents of that age, we don't really talk about stuff like this. There is there is no let's sit down and have a family meeting. I had a friend of mine tell me this a couple years ago. We were kind of talking about our situations, and her parents are older as well. She said, "Yeah, we got down with the siblings. We sat down with mom and dad. We said, this is what we want to do." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" But I would die for that, to have that kind of a situation where we have this nice family meeting. That doesn't happen. It's not going to happen, and to expect that to happen is silly on my part. So what can happen is I can do good detective work, and I can listen and pay attention and hear what they need and what they want. And so I do that to the best I can. Another lesson is the goal is protection. Wow. I, yeah, the goal of caregiving, in my experience, is to protect them from themselves, from the crazies who scam people, who are, after vulnerable populations like kids and elderly. Got so bad, years before the caregiving started, my dad, and there's research that shows that as people age, they become more trusting. So my dad was still driving, 88, 89, going to the grocery store. He had his credit card. He used to just pop it in his bag when he's walking out towards his car. And somebody he didn't know asked if he could help him. My dad said, sure. Well, he first said no, and they said, oh, no, let me help you. It's a lot. He said, oh, okay. He helped him. put it in the car, took the credit card, and started charging. Well, obviously, we stopped it as soon as possible. I wrote a film play about that called Senior Exploits, and we distributed it to local aging offices, just to make active seniors aware that, you know, these things happen. So that, and, you know, protecting them from themselves is the dicey part, because if it's their wishes, you know, and if they've been clear about what their wishes are. I know when sometimes if they're not in a place of clarity and cogence, it's hard to know. But at some point, you have to make sure you get the clues that you need to know what their wishes are, so that when they perhaps go beyond the level of lucidity that you need, you can do what they want and you can keep them safe and keep them safe from themselves. And, you know, I had to get to this point a year ago. I said, look, I know you want to stay in your house, but the only way you're going to be able to do that is if we get help. And my mom does not want anyone in her house. She didn't need any help. Probably heard this many times, right? She did need help. And fortunately, the caregiver was an angel, I truly believe, and worked very hard to get her to like her. And now she's one of the family. I am amazed at how far we've come. I never thought it would happen. Advocacy is paramount. How we're doing on time? Yeah, 12:26. Good. Um, so I believe that it's all about advocacy. I could write a book on advocacy. I got thrown out of the emergency department because of my advocacy. Uh, since then, I've also been put on the Patient Family Advisory Council of that same hospital. So apparently, there was something there more than just me being in whatever way they felt threatening. But yeah, I'm sorry. If it's my parents, I know their movie. Especially in the ER, you know their snapshot. Uh, you need to listen to me. And this is the hardest thing for caregivers I've spoken to, is they just don't want to ruffle feathers. They just don't. And you know what? I'm over that. I'm sorry. I will be respectful to providers, and then I will be firm. And then if I'm still not being heard because my best interests of my parents are not being served, then I'm going to get more Italian, and my voice level is going to rise, and my frustration is going to rise. I've never said or done anything I regretted in those stages, but I have been perceived as, you know, aggressive, as like, okay, fine, but you're taking care of somebody you don't even know, and I do, and so it would be helpful for you to listen to me. And I'm reasonable. I ask a doctor's opinion. I don't tell the doctors what to do, but I say, here's what's happened. Here's where we are. This is what we did last time. This is what works. This is what doesn't work. To do this, the caveat is you have to know what you're talking about. You have to do your homework. You have to be informed and educated and on top of things, because it's a difficult road to go, a path to go down already. But if you don't know what you're talking about, the credibility is gone, and it's even more frustrating. Fortunately, I do my homework, but it's still very difficult. I wouldn't change anything that I did that got me kicked out of the ER. It was the right thing to do. In fact, I was with 4 of their friends, and we all were kicked out. And then the person who called security was put into a de-escalation course at the hospital. Hi. All right. So let me go down to the next one. The job is draining. Draining. Like worrying, fear, lack of sleep, multifaceted exhaustion, personal sacrifice, to name a few. Again, it's not, oh, poor Santo, he's doing all these good things, poor guy. It's just the reality that we need caregivers to acknowledge that it's okay to acknowledge it's draining. And of course, the repair, the restoration of that is self-care. We'll get to in a moment. I used to, if you're old enough like me to remember the terror alerts, you remember we had red, orange, and I don't know, maybe yellow was the next. Well, I've been on red for 4 years. Last year, I'm down to orange. So my worry level is a lot less. Still high, but a lot less than it was. And I just figured that if somebody would just clone me instead of a sheep or instead of whatever else researchers are cloning, if it could just clone me, it would be a lot easier. Because then I could be there, do everything I need them to do. I'm still a full-time teacher at Moravian. And then that clone Santo could do all these other things, because when I'm there and when I get them out and when we do things, they're great. They light up, they are vital, they forget about all the problems they physically have. But right now, no one's come up with that cloning, unfortunately. And the last lesson is the caring is love. Yeah, it really is. So the gift is endless and meaningful opportunities to show and feel love. And that saying about love may not conquer all sure makes a difference when you care for somebody. I mean, really authentically love them and being able to care for them. And that's what's kept me fairly sane and grounded. Um, quick example, Father's Day was a few weeks back. Dad walks with a walker, but you never know what day, if he's going to be able to. Mom's on dialysis, you never know how she's going to feel. So it was a good day. We got him out for dinner, for lunch. Sunday lunch is always 1 o'clock. And went to one of their favorite places. Other people he hadn't seen came by. Dad had some wine, and my dad was never a drinker. He would have a glass, but it was a great day. My mom we were there 3.5 hours. You know, it's made all this make sense. So then I dropped him off at home. The caregiver was there for a bit. She had some other stuff to do. She was going to leave. So I went back. Usually they're in bed by 8. My dad was still so charged up. He's like, I'm kind of hungry for a little bit of that lasagna. It was 8 o'clock at night, 8:30. I'm like, okay, let's have some lasagna. How about a little more wine? I'm like, okay, here's this much wine. We were up till 11 o'clock watching game shows on ABC and silly stuff. The dog, I have a dog who's my heart, and I actually trained him as a therapy dog. And so Raphael was there with us, and we had a blast. We had a ball. My mom went to bed around 9, and here we are, me, my dad, and the dog, doing crosswords and watching TV and up eating snacks and having a little wine. I don't know when that's going to happen again, or if that'll ever happen again. So I'm gonna, and it's taken me a long time to learn this. I'm gonna focus on that stuff. I'm gonna focus on caring is love. And when the job becomes draining, I'm gonna do better with self-care, which I go off and on. Exercise is not my friend, but I do it now again. Started back up in March for my second stint of the last 12 months. So it's, I just keep getting back on that path, because if I am not healthy or good shape, how can I take care of them, right? So let's take a break and see if we have any questions, if I put everyone to sleep by now, or what.
Well, we do have a couple questions, actually.
Excellent.
Someone did ask, will the PowerPoint be available after the webinar?
So we were talking about this, and I don't know what the typical procedure is, but I can certainly talk with the staff and see if that makes sense. I often get worried about sharing PowerPoints because without the conversation, it doesn't always make sense. But I
Of
know
course.
that this will be recorded, right? So people will be able
Yes.
to watch it again,
Yes.
right?
So, and I think that I don't know when it gets put up on our website, but it does get added to the website so people can refer to it later. So I think they will be able to view the PowerPoint again. I don't think it's provided in any sort of document form, but they'll be able to see it again later because it will appear on our website at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another question here. I don't know if you'll be addressing this before the webinar's over, but I'll go ahead and ask it.
Sure.
And the member asked, you said you have a village to help you give care to your parents. How can we help caregivers accumulate a village?
Wow. That's a, I hate when people say, "Oh, that's a great question," but
Oh,
that really is a great question. um, so when we talk about, and again, I'm not always. I had to do some homework on the levels of practice because they've changed a lot since I was in grad school. But my guess is that this is more of a mezzo macro level of practice, but sometimes maybe not. So to me, here's what I think: caregivers don't have time to go to meetings, right? Necessarily. But what I did with the book is I've actually created a closed Facebook page. Closed is really important, so that they can come on and they can vent and they can talk about whatever and whine and complain because it's tough and nobody takes it personally and it never gets back, and it doesn't happen a lot, but every once in a while people vent. They need a safe space. So social media is an amazing tool for creating communities. So that's one way, I think. And at each level, the micro, mezzo, we can help people develop communities. The You're going to hear from some of the caregivers next, and when they talk about this, and they talk about, you know, going to lunch with people who are in the same situation when you can squeeze it in, going out for a drink of a coffee or something that late at night, that an all night diner because that's when everybody's asleep and that's when you get, and the energy that people create, even though they're exhausted, a lot of times the energy created for extroverts, according to Myers-Briggs, would be in groups. For introverts, according to the Myers-Briggs, it would be more for the one-on-one. Hey, can I vent to you? Can we grab a coffee? Can we just talk on the porch? Yeah. So the anytime we can create connections that are either virtual or real, I think that's helpful. And I wish I were more well versed on some of the newer organizations like um, the Seniors Helping Seniors and the Angels, and that help bring stuff to people. But a lot of times that stuff's taken care of. It's the caregiver that needs to have a break, and it's perceived as kind of selfish if we, as a caregiver, say we need a break. And you're going to hear somebody talk about that too. So it's very timely. So we'll talk about that again after we hear the video.
okay. Thank you for that. Do you have time for one more question at this
Absolutely.
point, or shall we? Okay. Another member has asked, how is the Area Agency on Aging helpful to you, and what more do you think could be done if the AAAs had additional resources to support caregivers?
I have a love affair with the AAAs in my community. They sponsored the senior exploits video I talked about. They were a sponsor then, which gave them the rights to use it to take it around throughout Berks County, which is my local area. I would love to talk to every AAA in the state. I would love to, um, have voices in there so that we have these kinds of conversations. And maybe sometimes it's more efficient that we do that at a state conference of the organizations. That might be another way to do it. But I find and again, I've worked with some in Montgomery County who I've done some workshops for, and obviously Berks. And my experience is always really positive, that they're open to, they don't always have the resources. I get it, but they're really open to, and I think if we can get this out, and it doesn't have to be me, but there's a lot of ways to get this out. I hope that helps.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask this one last question at this break, if that's okay.
Yep.
This member asked, any observations on cultural influences on caregiving? Being Italian, for example, Italy is a familial-focused culture. Any policy ideas for U.S. caregiving related to the cultural/country differences?
Oh my. My parents aren't online, right?
No.
So I can only speak from my experience, and probably from any kind of Western, like Latina, and so probably between Spain and Italy and Latinx folks. Here's my sense. There is a strong expectation that you will take care of us. That's what you do. You're the daughter, you're the son, and if there's more than one of you, you figure it out, and usually it becomes one person because the others are out of town, out of state, conveniently or not so conveniently. And I think what happens is we really have to do a primer on culture before we can just say, oh, well, this is what you should do for Italians. This is what you should do. Essentially, I think what happens is you have to know what the expectations are of the people who need care, right? My guess is the expectations would be, oh, they have their own life. That's okay. That's not Italian, let me tell you. That's not Italian. And I don't know who that would be, but I know there are ethnicities, there are population groups, segments, communities where, I can't expect them to do that. They have their life, and I'll be okay. I'll be in personal care, and I'll move to assisted care, and then go wherever I need to go. So I think you start with expectations, and from a policy perspective, what are the expectations of the various subgroups? Because we can't just assume the one size fits all. I think my lessons are kind of universal for what the caregiver is going through, but I don't claim to know what they need. I don't have a great handle on what they need. I just have a good handle on what I needed and what I need. And I think when you'll hear from some of the caregivers, that'll help too.
Great. Well, those are all the questions that we have at this point. So
okay. So here's the thing. I'm gonna have to switch audio so everybody can hear, and it's a choppy video. It's not intended to be Hollywood style, although I could do that, but it's not going to be, because the point was I wanted these folks to use Skype or their phone or whatever, and I just took a 7.5 minute clip because I think what they say, and then we'll talk about some of the lessons. All right, so just give me a second to do this fancy stuff that I have to do. Let me pull this up. And of course, Lorelei, tell me if we can't hear it.
Okay.
Let me go to the actual slide. Sorry about that. I should have said, oh. Is that audible?
What helped me to get through that time was taking it one day at a time. When I would think about the big picture and how is Thursday going to work and what about next week and my job, and just start spinning, I would lose my mind, and I would always ask myself, can you do it today? And if you need to take a break today, who can step in? Because obviously sometimes you get sick or something happens, but can I do this today? Can I make this sacrifice? Because there's going to be a beautiful moment. This is all temporary, as everything in this life is. and the storm passes. So if I can get through today and I can really lean on God and seize the moment and try and just enjoy one moment of the love and the sharing and the giving, then that's okay. And I'll let tomorrow take care of itself.
It is helpful to have friends who are going through the same thing. And I also have another friend who is caregiving for her mother-in-law and her husband's aunt. And we will get together for breakfast every now and when we can squeeze it in, and just commiserate about what's going on and talk about our experiences. And she may have experienced one thing with a certain level of care that I haven't, or I may have had experience with a certain issue that she hasn't. So it's really helpful to have others who are going through the same thing that you can talk to about it, share things that are going on and ask their opinion, and just have somebody to bounce things off of.
The best advice that I can give to anyone who finds themselves in the role of a caregiver is that it's going to be messy, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to do a lot of self-reflection and self-care, taking note of the emotions that you're feeling, because they're real. They're not something to throw away. But use those emotions to grow yourself, and use those emotions to love the person that you're called to love.
Talk to people, anybody and everybody. Research what you're going through, friends, family, clergy, support groups, because when it's all said and done, especially in a case like any of these processes, when you're the caregiver, the person you're caring for is going to pass away. And at that moment, if you've not established any type of support other than yourself dealing with it, you're going to be lost and you're not going to know how to function.
If you ever get into this position, I think you'll know when it's time. But those emotional things that contributed to things I didn't want to feel was just all the stress and pressures that I was feeling, being pulled in every direction. And it wasn't a healthy environment for my family, for my mother, and for me. So I wish everybody well, and I know you'll make the right decision when it's time.
In order to be an effective caregiver, you really have to figure out what it is that you want to accomplish with the caregiver. How do you want it to work in terms of its outcome? If I would advise that you allow the kids, if you have them, to be involved in the caregiving. I used to take my kids young and even into their teenage ages into the assisted living facility, and they would help. They would help her. They would, reset her television when she messed it up. They would watch Phillies baseball games with her, or the Eagles, and they developed a great relationship. So don't be afraid to really expose your kids. They won't break. They will have loving memories, and they will show their compassion. It ultimately gets more difficult as you face the final, stretches of the person's life. But the thing is it's not avoidable, and you've got to be able to feel and drink it all in, no matter what the feeling is. So if you feel hurt, angry, sad, frustrated, then you got to feel those things in the moment. And when you do that, and you let it, and then you allow it to play through your system, you're a better caregiver because you're more peaceful at it, and you're more compassionate at it. That whatever they need to be, you need to allow them to be. If they're grumpy and or sad, then let them be that way. Because in the end, it's their life, it's their fear of death that creates those situations. It's their regret, perhaps, in life that creates those situations. I can remember showing up at my mom's assisted living apartment on a Saturday morning just to do some regular stuff and visit her. And I entered the room and she was crying. And she cried for 4 hours. And I just held her hand. And I would ask her occasionally, "What's wrong, Mom?" And she couldn't answer me. Couldn't answer me. Either she didn't know or wouldn't answer me. I do believe this to be true, that if you're a caregiver, there is always something that you get from those caregiving moments. I'm not known in work circles for having great patience. I used to have I used to be poor at patience, but through the through the long-term, caregiver role that I played, I can say that I'm much more patient, much more peaceful now about everything. And that's part of my growth and journey. So these journeys are not just the individual who's you're giving care to. It's your own journey. It's a journey together, and it's actually quite special.
I learned a lot about myself. I learned about my my ability to do things that I never thought I could do. I got closer to my mother as a result of a very sad set of circumstances. And I really, even though times got really tough, I really feel like I was able to meet head on all the challenges that were presented to me. And if you had asked me before her stroke if I would do some of the things that I had to do over those 3 years, I would have just sucked my teeth, rolled my eyes, and been like, that is never going to be me. And you do it.
It's me, Santo. I'm back to congratulate.
Okay. Let me just reconnect the audio. And okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So perhaps that generate some more questions, and we'll have some time to do that. We've got about 8 minutes, but I just quickly listed some of the things that I gleaned from that about what my colleagues, and I know each of these people. It's funny because I didn't realize some of them were in this role. I liked the emphasis on it being our journey. Excuse me. Learning and growing to become our best you. And that's not selfish. That's self-caring. That's joining somebody, and together we're on this journey. It's not all about how difficult this is for either of us. It's about us walking together and taking to a place of peace where you can hopefully arrive with the same peace. I've learned a lot from my colleagues in this and from my parents. So some considerations, and again, stop me if you have questions. We could stop after this. There's a couple of slides. There's just 2 or 3 left. So just think about this if you haven't already. Do you have 2 clients if you're in micro practice? And does your work with the client support the caregiver? And I use the example of the hospital social worker who is supposed to be who includes and communicates with the patient's caregiver. Sorry about the typo. Includes and communicates with the patient's caregiver is one way for you to support the caregiver as client. In meso practice, are there opportunities to create and support communities of caregivers? And we talked a little bit about this in one of the questions that was asked. Can you create a virtual or an in-person support group? Again, knowing the reality in 2019, people don't have the free time necessarily, but sometimes they do want to meet and physically be in the same space. You'll just have to kind of gauge the pulse. But I think the key is not, as a person in a social worker in meso practice, is not to dictate, and not that we do this, but it's tempting to kind of structure it already, but more so to ask and to inquire and to explore what would work for you. You know, if you're all the caregivers and of a unit of the nursing home, or of the dementia unit, or even a personal care home where there isn't the kind of necessary medical care, but there's this need for caregivers to have support. And then at the macro level, in terms of policy, impact policy to support caregivers, one of the things that I think is going to really have to be addressed, and in some places is, employer policies that provide benefits or at least remove obstacles. I'll be happy if they just remove the obstacles for caregivers who work. I am, I have a community at Moravian where I teach that I met with in late winter this year, and said, you know, I just need to find some different ways to do this. I can work full time, I can do but I just need to find a different way. And they were willing to allow me to be at school fewer days than I'm typically there, and to do some of my coursework online, some of my advising online. I'm still doing the same level of work, and honestly, I haven't slacked in the last 5 years, and they realize that. So I guess it makes it easier for them to make these arrangements. But this is the kind of stuff that I don't think happens so easily. Again, I'm fortunate to be in a community that does care about its employees. So I think at this macro practice level, if we can affect what employers do and how they handle this, I mean, you know, family medical leave, I guess, is one way, but who can afford to, you know, give up salary for extended periods of time? I mean, some people do it. I know they have to do it, but it just, yeah, we need to be more flexible. So we have 2 minutes. Well, I can stay longer. I don't know what the rules are, but let me just go through the next 2 slides real quickly, because these are the workshop at the conference, which is the 22nd and 25th at Pocono Manor. I hope to actually see many of you there. What I'll plan to do there is a presentation similar, but I'll also have a breakout part where working with 3 groups, different levels of practice, and coming up with a plan for how we could support caregivers in each of those levels of practice. That's my plan for now. Look forward to your feedback. Here's some ways to get in touch with me. And here is ways to get the book. Shameless promotion. They're sold at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. I guess iTunes is going out soon, but still it's on iTunes and any other place that paperbacks or ebooks are sold. So any questions?
I think that we're good to go now. I don't see any more questions.
Excellent.
So thank you so much, Dr. Marabella, for that wonderful presentation, and thank you to you, our members, for attending. The link to the evaluation has been posted in the chat section and will remain up for a few minutes. A reminder that after you submit your evaluation, and if you attended the required 50 minutes, you will receive your CE certificate via email within a few days. So thank you all so much, and tune in next month.
Thank you.